You can create, update, and extract zip files with C#. You've been able to do that for a while. But now with .NET 10, you can do all those things asynchronously. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create and extract zip files with one line each. Then I'll show you how to gain more control over which files get added to your zip file. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make becoming a software developer easier. I offer dozens of paid training courses to ensure that you stay up to date in software development, regardless of where you are currently in your career. For more information, including to get a free course, go to imtimcorey.com. All right, here I have Visual Studio 2026, where I create a new project and we'll create a console app. Really simple. This could just be a file if you wanted to, but we'll call this zip files and zip files app for the solution name. And this is going to be, like I said, just a program.cs, and that's it. So we'll leave all the standard things alone and hit create. And once we do, we can see we can get rid of this and just start with our blank file. Now I'm going to add, so we're ready for it, I'm going to add my using directive using system.io.compression. So that's the one using directive we're going to need. And then we're going to add 3 different strings so we're all set up to use our one-liners easily. So string source directory. And this is going to be a string literal, that's the @ symbol, which allows me to use the slash without having to escape it. So normally if you didn't have the @ symbol, you'd have to have double slashes because the backslash is a escape character. So we're going to put this in temp and test. So that's the folder we're going to zip up. And then we're going to have the destination zip file. And that's going to be, and let's just save this C:temp on my clipboard. That way I can just paste it in and say archive.zip. And then we're going to have one more, and that's going to be the destination directory. And that's going to be, wow, let's do this right. There we go. And we're going to call this extracted. So this is the folder that we're going to extract to when we extract our zip file. So this will be the directory we zip up. This is the name of the zip file, including the full path. And this is the folder we're going to extract to. Now, let me bring over this folder. So we have here our temp. Ignore the stuff in temp right now. But the test folder, that's what we're going to zip up. So we're going to zip up these 2 files, plus in the subfolder, we have this 3rd file. And that's important. I want to make sure you see that we can do subfolders as well. There's a tricky way of doing that, or a thing to think about when you are creating these zip files more manually. We'll do that in a little bit. So the archive.zip will show up in this directory. And here's a pro tip. Don't put archive.zip in this test directory. You don't want to put your zip file in the directory you're trying to zip up. That causes a recursion, that causes a blocking issue, and it's going to break. Okay, so here's our first one-liner. We're going to await, because asynchronously, we're going to await zip file dot create from directory async, the source directory, the destination zip file, and then we're going to say, let's do compression level dot smallest size. And we're going to say include base directory is false for now. So let's unpin this. We don't need to have that on the screen. We can still make this a little better. This is still one line, even though I'm putting out multiple lines. But this is our one-liner. This is going to zip up this directory into this file that it creates with just this one line. Now we're going to use compression size of smallest, meaning go ahead and compress this thing. Now we're not worried about compression right now. That's just the smallest size, meaning the most efficient. It'll be a little slower compared to the fastest speed you could do. But this gives it the best sizing. I don't have anything really that is big and compressible in our test folder, but that's okay. So this last one, include base directory, this is by default false, but I want to make sure that you see it because we're going to change this. So include base directory means, let's look over here in our test folder. If we said include base directory, inside a zip file, you would see test. And there you would see these files. But if we say false, we're just going to see these files and folders, not the test. So it usually you want to say false, but if you want to see this, test folder at the root of your zip file, then you'd say true here. So let's run this real quick. And this is going to start up and immediately be done. So go over here. We now have archive.zip. We can open up and see we have our 2 files plus our subfolder with our image file. So that's all inside of our archive.zip. Now we can go ahead and delete this real quick, and then we can say true for this, just so you can see how that works. And come over here, we have archive.zip, and notice there's that test folder, and then inside there are the files that we're really looking for. So again, you probably wouldn't say true to that, but you could. Okay, so that is our one-liner for, by the way, I'll give you a source code for this. There's a link down in the description. You can go ahead and get that sent to your email address. So you can have this if you want it. That's our create from directory. Now, actually, let's run this one more time, just so we have that zip file there. Okay, so archive.zip is now there. Now I want to comment this out, and I am going to create our one-liner for extracting it. So await zip file dot extract to directory async, and the destination zip file and the destination directory, and then we can just leave it as such, or there's one more thing we can do, and let's scroll down here, and that is overwrite files. So we could say, do we want to overwrite? Again, by default, it's false, but this is overwrite files. So if you, we can even say overwrite files : this will allow you to either say, hey, if you're extracting the file's already there, don't let it keep going. Or you can say, yes, go ahead and overwrite those files with the new version. Okay, so let's go ahead and again, notice there's no extracted folder. So if we run this now with our one-liner, it's done. And now we have an extracted folder, which has our 2 files plus the subfolder with our image file. And again, whoops, one too far. If we change this to actually if we run it again, we're going to get an exception because that file already exists. So you can't extract it again. But if we were to say true here and run this again, then no problem. I went ahead and extracted it again, and there they are. So that's how you would extract to your zip file. Now, we're not done yet because I want to do one more thing, which is show you how to selectively add files to your zip file. Because this right here, when we're zipping things up, that just grabs a folder and chucks it into a zip file. But there may be occasion where you say, hey, I don't want to zip every file in this folder, just certain ones. So what you can do, and I want to show this because it's a bit more complicated than just going, hey, here's the folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to say await using file stream, zip stream equals new destination zip file. The file mode is create. The file access is going to be write. The file share is going to be none. And then the buffer size, we'll leave it the default, which is 4096. We can talk about what that means in a minute. And then use async, we're going to say true. So this is going to create a file stream for our brand new zip file called archive.zip. We're going to put it in create mode, which means we're creating a new one. We're not going to be updating an existing one. Now, by the way, create mode is going to overwrite it, but create new is going to throw an exception if it's already existing. So create, if there's already a archive.zip, it's just going to overwrite it with a new one. But if we said create new, it would say, no, there's already a zip file there with that name. That's an exception. So it's up to you whether you want to overwrite zip files or not. We're saying write mode. We're going to write to the file. And file share none, that's not about actual file sharing. That's basically saying, do you want to allow other processes to access this file while you're working on it? And the answer is no, we don't. We want to make sure this is exclusively used for us. We're going to lock it while we're chucking things into it. So lock that down. This is the buffer size. You can play around depending on your particular situation if you want to make that larger or not. There's some documentation online you could go read about if you want to make it 128K or something like that. This is 4K right now. So this is the default, and it's usually the most efficient. But again, it depends on your specific situation and what type of files you are zipping up. And then finally here, this is async. So this is a tricky one. We're turning on asynchronous file writing. Now, because we did this, we are doing an await at the beginning of here. If we said false here, which is the default, then it wouldn't say await here. So this is going to use asynchronous, which you may say, well, I always want to use asynchronous, and that's not necessarily true. If you're not doing async down below, then, which we're going to be, but if you're not, then this could actually slow down the creation of your zip file by like 10 times. But if you do it correctly, it could speed up or make it more effective. So it all depends on your situation. Make sure that you test these things out, because depending on your processes and how you set things up, you might just want to do it synchronously. But especially if you're doing zipping on a web server where you're going to have a lot of things working on this, make sure you're as efficient as possible and using separate threads potentially, then you want to make sure that you're using asynchronous. Therefore, make sure you set that to true. Make sure you test it. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so now that I have that, by the way, this is a file scope using statement, which means it will be done at the end of this file, which is the end of our application. I'm going to say using zip archive equals await zip archive dot create async zip stream, and then the archive mode is going to be create, and then we're not going to leave it open at the end. So that's the, if you wanted to leave this open even after we're done with our using directive, which we don't, we'd say true here, but we're going to leave it false. And then finally, the encoding we're going to set as null, which is the default. We want to set it to null. Okay, and that's the most efficient way of doing things. The actual documentation says, hey, if you're going to change it from null, you need to be very careful, you know why, because it's almost certainly better to say null. All right, so let's grab a string array called files, and we'll say equals directory dot get files source directory. Now the pattern, I'm just going to say star, but we could say like only star.png or something like that. That would be where you'd filter. That's one way of filtering. and then search options is all directories. So again, I'm going to show you how to basically do the same exact thing that we did with our one-liner here, but this is where, because I'm kind of exploding this out for you, you can figure out what things you need to filter. For example, if you only wanted to bring in text files, you'd say star.txt, okay? Or if you want to, after you have your list of files, you go through and look at that list and take things out of the array. That's up to you as well. So for us, we're just going to do a for each. And we're going to say for each file path in files. And we're going to say string relative path and name. I'm going to make clear on this. So path dot get relative path, source directory, and file path. So what this does is it takes our file path, which is a full name of the file. So it's going to be c:/temp/test/ I don't know, whatever the name of one of the files in there is. That's the name that's in this file path. What we're going to do is get the relative file path relative to the source directory. This is the root. So we're going to say, hey, relative to this, for example, output.log, actually we're going into test here. Output.log would be just output.log. That's the relative path. But for this one, light dash, yada, yada. For that one, it would be subfolder/light, all the rest. So that's because the relative path starts with subfolder because we're in the test folder. While we're here, let's go ahead and delete the extracted folder. Okay. In fact, you know what? Let's go ahead and delete the archive as well. So we're all set up and ready. All right, so now we have the relative path as well as the full path. This is important. We're going to say await archive.create entry from file async. This is the async part of it. And we're going to say file path and then the relative path and name. So it takes two things. It takes first, where's the full file? There it is. And then it says, hey, what do you want it to be in the zip file? Because we could rename it. We could take in, text1.txt and rename it to be Tim's text1.txt or something like that. Or we could say, hey, even though this file is in subfolder, we want to kind of collapse to everything be in the root. So therefore, we're just going to say this file name without the subfolder. So it's going to be in the root with output.log and process._mp4. So this is going to get the relative path. So we keep that same structure as we had in our source directory. So that's it. That's the code. So we're first creating a file stream for a zip file. Then we're actually creating a zip archive out of that stream. And then we're taking the list of files from the source directory and we're putting those files into the zip file one by one. That's what we're doing. That's the way we're doing this. So again, we could filter this star here, or we could say, hey, let's limit this file list. Let's kind of crunch it down. Or in here in our for each, we could say, hey, if it doesn't match this pattern, just skip over it. So it's all up to us how we filter. Again, I'm not going to filter, but this is how you would do it. All right, let's run this. And if we do, it's done. Now I come over here to our folder. We have archive.zip, looks the same. Okay, so that's our archive.zip. Now, if you wanted to make a change, if you wanted to say, you know what, I don't want to do the relative path, we could say something different like, and let's comment this out. We could say path dot, I believe it's get file name. There we go. And just get the file name. So file path. And what this would do is it would just get the file name and it would cut off the relative path, which would put everything in the root. So let's run this again. Okay, it's done. Now in archive.zip, notice all the files are in the root of the zip file. That's one of the things you could do if you decide you wanted to do that. Now, I don't. So let's just cut this out. But I will put it over here in case you wanted to do that yourself. Okay, that's another option of, but just remember that if you have two files that have the same name but in different paths, they would cause a collision because of the fact that you're now putting it all in the root. So you can do a lot of fun things with how you change this zip file. But I do want to point something out. If you decide, hey, I want to do this and I want to do it this way, and I also want to extract at the end to verify things are working or something like that, well, you're going to have a problem. I'm going to show you the problem and I'm going to show you why it's a problem. So run this and boom, we have an exception. And if you don't know, read the exception messages. Always read exception messages. The process cannot access the file ctemp archive.zip because it's being used by another process. Remember back up here where we said that we want to file share as none. We're saying, no, nobody else can access this. Well, we tried to access it with our extracted directory. It didn't work. So our zip file got created just fine. But when we went to extract it, it didn't work. And the reason why is because of how we're using statements. So right here, where we created a zip archive, we said, and actually we can do it, one level higher, at the zip stream, the file stream. At the file stream, we said await using, but it's a file scoped using statement. And so what happened is that it doesn't get closed until after line 24. But we want to use it on line 24. How do you solve that problem? It's not a hard problem to solve. We just take the semicolon off the end. We wrap it in parentheses. So now it's wrapped, and now we put curly braces here. Let's delete the end one. We put curly braces here. Okay, so now we're doing a scoped using statement. So it's only scoped to open here and close here, meaning it gets released at this curly brace. Now, inside here, we have a file scope namespace, but actually it gets released when we hit that curly brace because of the fact that it's inside of a scope. So normally the scope is the file, but here the scope is going to be this curly brace right here because that's what it's inside of. So now, if we run the same code, the only change I made was adding these curly braces and taking that semicolon off and wrapping this in parentheses. If we run this now, runs just fine. And if we come over here, we'll see we have the extracted folder that's correctly populated, as well as our zip file, which has all of our stuff in it. So we can delete those, but that's how we can play around with both zipping things and unzipping things, and then also doing both at the same time if you really wanted to, without stepping on our own toes. So that's how to do things asynchronously in .NET 10. Again, this is a .NET 10 thing, where we have file async, and make sure you're setting this to true, or using create from directory async or extracted directory async. There's lots of ways of doing this to make sure that we are not creating blocking processes should we need to. Now, it might not always be necessary to have a non-blocking process. Maybe it's fine to just do it in line. But if you need a non-blocking process, this is the way to do it. All right. Thanks for watching. Again, that source code's down in the description. And as always, I am Tim Corey.